as humans, we are always learning. We're just not always conscious of what we're teaching to other people, right? And we train people how to treat us, and we teach our children how to interact in the world, and they watch us. So if you're not taking care of yourself, what are they learning? They might be learning, oh man, this caretaking stuff is terrible. It's bananas. I'm not going to do it.
Hi there, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Michaela Pereira. Whether you're listening or watching, I'm really glad you're here, and I'm hoping to share some sunshine with you. In addition, on this show, we're going to have some hard conversations about things that we just don't talk about enough. And one of those topics is this. We're not good at, as a society, as a Western culture as a whole, in dealing with decline, aging, even death. And the notion of just burying our heads in the sand and avoiding the whole area of discussion, it's not helping anyone, especially when you as the adult are called to not only care for the younger generation, your kids, but also your elders, your aging parents. Here's one of those topics we're not talking enough about. It's called the sandwich generation. My guest today is someone who found herself stuck right in the middle. A busy working mom of two, Christy Byrne Yates, had to take on the role of caretaker and care for her aging parents. She wants to help others that are finding themselves in the very same position. Christy believes, and this is very important to hear, friends, that you can indeed thrive in the sandwich generation. Christy, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad we're talking about these things. You're absolutely right. We have to talk.
You're passionate about this because you felt very alone when you went through this yourself. Tell us a little bit about what it was like for you when you found yourself there stuck in the middle.
Oh yeah, I have to tell you, I sort of woke up one day and realized my parents needed a lot more help, and I'd been hearing this, and I jumped in. And meanwhile, I've got tweens and young teens, and I'm working full time as a school psychologist. It was a demanding job. And as it turns out, both my parents had some form of dementia. My mother had Alzheimer's, my father had vascular dementia. And it was really hard. And eventually, both of them died 7 weeks apart, at the same time that my son was leaving home to go to college. So it was a lot. And when I came back to work after taking a short time off, um, people were coming out of the woodwork saying, I'm in your shoes now. What do I do about this? What do I do with it? And I thought, we are not talking a lot about this.
And we're not alone in it, right? That's the part that I think probably in a way helped you. And then also, did it then cause you to say, okay, we've got to do more about this?
Yes, and absolutely. I thought, well, we need to have conversations about it. And I didn't know the term sandwich generation. I didn't coin that. I found that out later when I researched my book, and it fits. It's like being squished between two generations. I also felt at the time that I was kind of being pulled, so I used to try to think about being Elastigirl. Remember from The Incredibles, the superhero? I thought, that's it, man. I am being pulled all the time.
Well, and actually, I wanted to talk to you about nomenclature and talk about names because I've heard things like panini generation, messy, so squeezed that the filling is spilling out. I've heard the club sandwich generation because there's grandparents that are in the mix. The open face sandwich generation. I suppose it almost doesn't matter what you call it. It's the fact that if you're the person in the middle, you need some help, you need some resources, and you need to acknowledge what you're going through.
That is exactly right. And the more I talk to people, some people are very attached to how they describe it. But other people are like, I feel like I fit there, but I don't have children. But I have a busy caseload. I'm starting a business. I'm the CEO of my company, anything. And I say, hey, if you feel sandwiched, you can call yourself what you need to call yourself. But what kind of support do you need? And then we start to build those supports. So absolutely, people can describe themselves in a lot of different ways. And people are doing a lot of caregiving. They're caregiving for spouses, and could be grandparents, could be parents, and also special needs children and other people. Siblings are taking care of siblings. There are a lot of children who serve as caregivers at times. there's a lot more going on than we're thinking about on a regular basis. So for sure, it's important to talk about.
And the other part of it that occurred to me, Christy, is that it isn't always something you can plan for or anticipate. Look, we know our parents are going to get older. They're going to age. We're going to as well. So there is a certain amount of planning that can go on. But this exact circumstance of finding yourself as the chief caregiver, that isn't always planned. That's what happened to you. You suddenly were the one that was closest in proximity to your parents. Your siblings lived out of state.
Exactly. Yeah, it's you don't vote for this, right? You don't run for this job. It sort of it sort of shows up and you do it, and sometimes you can't do it, and that's okay to say I can't do it too. I mean, there is that part, and you have to work around these things. But yes, we're not thinking about it all the time because we're busy living our lives. Um, and like I said, I kind of woke up going, oh my gosh, they need a lot more help than I thought of. And it just became more of a snowball as things progressed. So, yeah, I think a lot of people, and that's why I called my book Building a Legacy of Love, because the one thing, the many things my parents did for me that was really key was they had made end of life decisions long before they needed to. And thank goodness, because those are not decisions you can make when you are in the midst of Alzheimer's and post stroke and you have all kinds of cognitive disability. And so I'm grateful that they had an estate plan, they had end of life wishes, they had saved their money well. There were a lot of lessons I learned in this process.
I imagine it's helped you think about what you want to do for your kids new age.
Oh, yeah. No, my husband and I looked at each other and said, we got to do this now because our kids were still under the age of 18. And so we needed to put some things in place. And we didn't think about that. And we're intelligent people. So I know a lot of people who don't do this. A lot of people don't. And or some people think I don't really have an estate. If you have anything, you have an estate. And so you want to protect it and make those decisions. And I was grateful that my parents let me know what they wanted at the end of their lives. And I
Mhm.
talk to so many people who say I can't have that conversation with my mom or dad, but it's really important to think about it.
It's been difficult for me, and my parents have been sort of forcing me into that conversation, and over time, they started out slowly, but we're at a point now that I don't, like, run from the room, with my hair on fire each time they wanna bring it up because, they are hard conversations. One of the things that I wanna sort of address are some of the emotions that come up when you are when you are the sandwich filling. Let's just run with this metaphor. I imagine there are feelings of guilt, right? Of things you should be doing better. I've watched some friends feeling like they're never giving enough to either their kids or never enough to their parents. It's sort of like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, even just like the compassion fatigue of it all. Go through some of the things that come up for people that are experiencing this.
Yeah, you know what, Michaela? It's all the feels. It's resentment. I resent that I'm having to do this. Resentment sometimes of siblings, like, why aren't they doing enough? Or it could be frustrations that, why am I stuck with this? I didn't think about caregivers who maybe are called in to care for a parent that they have a fractured relationship with. There's a lot of stuff in that. But there's
Mhm.
also a lot of grief before you even realize it. Before someone passes away, you're already
Yes.
watching them, especially if you have a deteriorating kind of disease process or dementia process. You're watching someone you love fade away, and you're already in the midst of grief. So it's all the feels, definitely feeling like you're not doing enough. And then another one that comes up, we don't like to talk about it, but there's going to be a time where you might have to choose between your child and your parent and who can you be with, right? That's really hard. We don't, we think we can cover it all, but what if you're a single parent? What if your partner is traveling? I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios, but those things show up.
I imagine you have to learn to give yourself a whole lot of grace almost every darn day.
Self care is something that we talk a lot more about these days. I think that's one thing pandemic did. The little gifts of the pandemic that come up every now and then, right? And one of them is we just kind of talked about self care a lot. And that's critical for caregivers because you can burn out. And when you burn out, everyone loses. So it's really important. You have to put yourself first.
It's the metaphor overused of the flight attendant that tells you to put the mask on
Yeah,
yourself
yeah,
before you put the
yeah,
mask on the person you're traveling with. If you don't take
yeah.
care of you, then everybody's lost. One of the pieces that I think that gets lost in the conversation about this, because we become so hyper focused, and as we should, because our aging parents, you're still a child, you're still their baby, you're still their kid, and you know how much they're relying on you, but you're uniquely suited by trade to talk about what's happening with the kiddos in this situation,
Right,
right?
right.
The kiddos are also watching you help your parent. That's their
Yeah,
grandparent that's being cared
yeah.
for.
In some ways, very pragmatically, you are training your children how to care for you someday. So are you? And
Be
my thing,
careful, they're watching.
they are. And my thing about it is, as humans, we are always learning. We're just not always conscious of what we're teaching to other people, right? And we train people how to treat us, and we teach our children how to interact in the world, and they watch us. So if you're not taking care of yourself, what are they learning? They might be learning, oh man, this caretaking stuff is terrible. It's bananas. I'm not going to do it. I don't know. There's all kinds of things. The other thing younger kids might not understand is when you're really stressed out, they might not know that this is really about your frustration with your caregiving responsibilities, and they can oftentimes internalize it and think that maybe that's about me. What did I do? Mommy's upset and I'm not sure why. What did I do? It's really important to realize that self-care is also part of your parenting, because we know from research
Mhm.
that kids of parents who are maybe suffering from extreme anxiety or mental health conditions, those children suffer sometimes. And as a school psychologist, I can tell you what happens at home comes to school. And we see that in behavior.
Say more about that. Say more about
Yeah, we see kids who struggle sometimes, and I would talk with teachers and parents of a child that might be struggling, and one of the first questions I'd ask is, has anything changed in the home? And I might hear something like, well, my mother died recently and she was their caregiver from while I was working for all these years. And instantly I know,
that.
wow, I've got this child who's going through a grief process, and we need to wrap some services and work with this child and help them. And what kind of counseling support can we provide? We might have a person say, well, I just moved my dad in and he's got stage 4 colon cancer. Wow, well, this is a big thing. And so maybe you don't have time to work with your child with reading or homework or anything. And so those things start to show up at school. So we also know that there's just a lot of kids that are acting as caregivers, and that can be, and that's perfectly normal. Like in history, we've always done that. People help out, but sometimes
Mhm.
it can cross over to be really, really detrimental for a child who maybe can't participate in after school activities. Think about this high school senior that's thinking about college, but they can't join the band because they've got to go home and take care of grandma. They can't join this club, that club. It's just it's oppressive at times.
What advice do you have in a situation like that? I mean, I suppose I would assume that that's when community can be a support, right? If you've got a neighbor family or a even a sibling who has kids around your kid's age, pressing them into service to make sure that there's another family that they can feel connected to at a time like that might be of assistance.
I definitely feel that you have to build your team, and that also is
Yeah.
not necessarily something we're great at, especially here in America, right? We want to do it ourselves. We're like all me, right? And the thing is,
Yeah, in other countries, it takes a village to raise a child. We don't necessarily
not anymore.
subscribe to
Yeah,
that.
not anymore.
Not anymore.
And the thing is, people will help. And if you think about when somebody asks you for help, how does that make you feel? Sometimes it makes you feel like, oh, really? They're asking again. But most of the time, we're like, I would love to help you if I can. Let me help you.
It depends on who's asking,
Yes,
right?
yes. And so I think it's important to ask. So it could be something like, yeah, neighborhood kids are there. Do you know the parents? Can you ask for can you pick up my child from school today? Can they ride home with you? Can they go to soccer practice with you? I will help out when I can. Or even something like, I can't get out of my house right now and I need these things. If you're going to the store, could you pick up X, Y, and Z? I
Right.
mean, all of that. I would also say, if your kids are enrolled in school, I would talk to school staff. Find out if there's a counselor on
Okay.
staff, find out if there's a school psychologist on staff, or the administrator, and say, this is what's going on in my home right now. Do you have supports in the school system? Maybe there's some after school tutoring. Maybe there's just somebody who can check in with a child who might be really, really stressed out. So, yeah, people will help you.
Let me ask about the feelings that the kids could be experiencing and what you've seen. Because so if you have either someone in the home that is aging, either a memory care issue or physically ill, right? Grandma,
Yeah,
grandpa, or auntie and uncle, or whatever that is not well, or even in a facility that you're going to visit, the older generation that isn't doing well, perhaps they're in a hospice
yeah,
situation, that there's that conversation you have with kids,
yeah,
and being
yeah,
age appropriate, and because this is somebody they love, this is
yeah,
somebody they have a
yeah.
relationship with. As a psychologist, give us a good word on how to approach those conversations, because sometimes I think we think, oh, let's just these aren't kid conversations. Kids pick up
Right.
on a lot of stuff. They're pretty savvy.
That's it exactly. They're going to pick up on something. So sometimes kids will develop more anxiety with the unknown, and or the
Mm.
fear that they can't ask you because you're going to be more upset. Listen, our children don't like to see us
Oh.
cry. They don't like to see us be upset. They worry sometimes if they're not old enough to understand that it's not about them, they might think it's about them. It's important to have these conversations. And if you can't and you don't feel you can, that's why I say reach out to um, counseling staff that might be able to help you navigate those conversations. I'm a part of a group called alsauthors.com, and there are just a plethora of great children's books that talk about how to talk to kids about dementia, because that can be very scary for children too. But they're also
Sure.
going through their process of grief or frustration. They might feel angry and resentful too, and anything they're feeling is valid. It's just being able to
Mhm.
talk about them and be clear with them and ease their fears. It's hard to see someone you love suffer. And so you want to make
Mhm.
sure you explain as age appropriately as you can. And there's a lot to say about that, but um, be clear and be honest. And even about death, it's important to be clear about that. We don't want to dance around that. We don't want to say something like, well, grandma went to sleep, because then the next time you go to sleep, your child's going to be anxious,
Oh my goodness, you've just
right?
created a nightmare,
Yeah,
new fear
yeah,
unleashed in your child.
right.
Look, I was that kid. If I knew it existed, then it was immediately like,
Yeah,
okay, now I'm terrified of that,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
so yes, I suppose you have to be really mindful about how you approach some of these conversations. I was thinking about the idea that so many people now are working from home, right?
hmm,
And if you're in this situation where you're a caregiver who is caregiving for an elderly adult, and you've got your kiddos obviously in the home, could see that could cut both
yeah,
ways. It could be a blessing, and it could also be overwhelming, right? To
yeah,
be working
yeah.
from home in that.
Yeah, it's very hard, and that's another area where again you want to sort of lean into other folks who can help you out. Get helping to ensure that your kids have a healthy um, outside outlet. Right now, maybe it's
An outlet.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it's
Yeah.
sports, maybe it's arts and crafts, maybe it's just time away at a neighbor's house for a little bit. um, and that's it's just important to keep them involved with other people, because it can be very isolating, and that's also detrimental for us, and it's detrimental for kids too. So we want to stay connected. So it is leaning into other folks and helping.
It's interesting to think about the fact that in all of this, it's sometimes when you're in a thing that is hard, that is difficult, and you're working through it, maybe not gracefully. I know I,
Right.
I tend to muddle my way through these things. You sometimes forget about the importance of the thing itself. because the process, the grind, the struggle, the phone calls, the doctor's appointments, I can imagine that it's important to also remember in these times that you love that person if you have a good relationship with the person you're caring for, because
Right.
I understand people have fraught relationships, but also not to lose. And it comes back to the title of your book, Legacy of Love.
Hmm.
That was so important for you to put that word in the title because you want to make sure that love is still
Right.
there, right? And you want it to be the thing that lasts after they're gone, after this hard transition from life ends.
Yeah. And, if you have had a fraught relationship with your parents and it feels awkward to say, well, I'm going to lean into all this love I have for this person I, have resented all my life, where else can you lean into love? How about love for self? And that's a great role
Hmm.
modeling for your kid, right? Your children
Hmm. Hmm.
learn how to love themselves by seeing how you take care of yourself, right? And you can even be very, direct about that. I'm doing this for me right now because I need to
Hmm.
relax. I need to let go of some stress, or this is why I'm, taking time away from you, not because I don't want to be with you, but because mommy needs a minute, and this is why. And when you need a minute, mommy's going to let you have that minute. And then your child also could be the person that you love, that you want to lean into. Like, that's the love. I want them to see me being a caring, compassionate human being, because that's how I can raise a caring, compassionate human being, is by being that for them and for others too.
And even for your, if you have a senior that you're caring for, that conversation too, because I can imagine for a while you might feel like, I don't know if it was in your situation, that all you're a secretary and you're a nurse and you're the lunch lady, and that's it. Maintaining the relationship
Yeah.
part of that is also, you have to be intentional about it as well.
Yeah. There was a time when I had dinner for my folks. I tried to do this really nice um, dinner for them, and we had them over. And this was really towards the end of their life. And my dad just he couldn't even hold a fork anymore. And I was not my best self that night. I was overcome, and I didn't realize it, but I was overcome with this anticipatory grief. Like, just seeing this just devastated me. They weren't gone yet, and I felt like I was losing them, and I was not nice. And my son, who was just turning 18 at the time, looks at me across the table and just kind of mouths the words, "Mom, you're not being nice." And I thought, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it was like a slap of cold water in my face. And I wasn't angry at
Wow.
him. I was grateful and proud of him that he trusted me enough that he could say that to me. And then it woke
Yeah.
me up, and I thought, I have to show up differently for my kids. And I have to show up differently
Yeah.
for my parents, and that's not who I am. So I need to do this differently. And I just changed in that moment, and it was very impactful for all of us. And my husband took my parents home, and my kids just came and hugged me, and we sobbed. And it was what we needed at that moment to just deal with what was coming. And it was, and
Yeah.
I, like I said, I'm grateful. I wasn't frustrated with my kids. I was frustrated with myself, but I also, they forgave me. I forgave myself, and we could move on for this next really hard part of our lives. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Will you say more about anticipatory grief? Because that is
Yeah.
something that I had not thought of. And
Well,
maybe it's new to other people as well.
it was new to me. I didn't know I really didn't think about it, but I didn't know that term, actually. And in fact, in my book, I'm not sure I used that term. I've learned it since that time. But
Mm.
you think about it, it's like you're anticipating the grief you're going to have, because you're seeing someone, the end of this story, what's happening.
You know how this ends,
Yeah,
people. None of us
yeah,
get out of this
that's
alive, right?
right.
This is not a spoiler alert.
Yeah, and so really what it is we don't know the date and the time and the actual reason why, but we're already grieving the loss. We might be grieving the loss, and this happens to us all the time, Michaela, in our lives with our children. I mean, parents of children who have special
Yes.
needs are going through a lot of
Yes.
grief process, mourning
Yes.
the loss of what they dreamed for this child. But we see this if we're losing a spouse, if we're losing even our own disabilities that we may eventually walk into. And so all of these things go on. And so grief is there when we have love, right? And so it's just the other side of it, and we have to learn how to understand it, accept it, be with it, get the help we need for it. um, I
Mhm.
mean, I definitely took advantage of therapy and found people who could support me, because I knew I needed to be my best for a lot of other people, and at least feel good, feel better, feel capable. And
Feel
that's a
better.
yeah.
Feel better.
I mean, that's you asked me about the feelings. The feeling of not being enough is a big one for caregivers. Like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing it right, or something like that. That comes up a lot. And then that brings other feelings along with it.
I think it's really powerful. You told me earlier that this book, you wrote it as you were processing because your parents have since passed. You wrote
Mhm.
this book as a way to process your grief and losing them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was a great way for me to process that. It was also just, I wrote the book I wished I'd had. I was looking for things and I couldn't find things. I found things that talked about how to care for my parents, and that was really important. I didn't see anything out there, and I didn't know I needed it, but I didn't see anything out there talking to me as the sandwich generation person who also had these children in my home that I, loved and adored and wanted to raise well. And then here I am being pulled in different directions all the time. So
Yeah.
that's why I wrote it.
Well, look, she self-published this book, by the way, people, because she knew if there's a will, there's a way. And I know you've found audience for it because this is something more and more people, it feels as though the way things are going in our society, more and more people are living longer. They're staying in their homes longer. They're relying on the younger generation to care for them, which is what you did. You stood up and were there for your folks. Thank you so much for joining me today, Christy. It's been a joy to speak with you, to hear about your journey. And you've been so generous in sharing all of your path with us because I think it's going to be a big help to other people. I'm going to give you the title of the book one more time if you want to pick it up: Building a Legacy of Love, Thriving Inside the Sandwich Generation. And I also want to point out Christy is the host of a podcast herself, Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, an ALZ authors podcast. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Christy, much love to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And everybody else at home, we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.